Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's your boy DLloyd, and today we are going to be talking about the top 15 upcoming NFL free agents. Now, I came across this article by thebiglead.com. It was written by William Pitts. He gave his opinion on the top 15 guys. I figured why not go over that list with you guys, give you guys my opinions on those players, and whether or not I think those guys will return to that team or if they will leave in free agency. We just wrapped up the end of the regular season. I figured this is a pretty good time to start, guessing and speculating as to what could possibly occur in the offseason. Now, of course, some things can change. We're going to have a bunch of coaches get fired today. Probably by the time you're watching this, we had a bunch of coaches get fired today. We're going to have a bunch of movement before we actually get to free agency, but it's definitely a great time to speculate. But before we go ahead, please go ahead and leave this video a like, helps me out a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already, man. We're going to start at number 15. The man, the myth, the legend. We have Jameis Winston, man. And Jameis Winston just cannot seem to get out of his own way. I mean, literally, like, at all. This man just threw for over 5,000 yards, 30 passing touchdowns. That sounds phenomenal from any quarterback to have those type of numbers, man. But he had a small little flaw, and that little flaw was that he threw 30 interceptions to go with the 30 touchdowns. Now, after the game where he just threw a game-sealing pick six that lost the game end of the season for Tampa Bay, of course they weren't playing for anything. He said if you look at his stats, he was balling. He just has to figure out how to stop turning the ball over to other teams, and that is true. But we know Jameis Winston is a risk taker. He's going to win you games. He's going to lose you games. But at the end of the day, Jameis Winston will have some sort of impact on the game. Sometimes, they lose because of Jameis Winston. Now, ultimately, what he does in the offseason, or what Tampa Bay does in the offseason, is tricky, right? Because Jameis Winston reportedly is looking for around $30 million per season. Is Tampa Bay willing to make that type of investment? Do you franchise the Jameis Winston, give him one more season to prove it? Do you give him a 2-year deal? I don't see any way Jameis Winston gets a long-term contract. I think that's pretty stupid for a team to do that. Ultimately, though, I think he ends back up in Tampa Bay. Where they're picking in the draft, I don't know who falls that far. I mean, of course, we know Burrow going number 1. Will Tua fall with that injury? I doubt it. I think Tua will still be a top 7 draft pick. You look at Herbert. Is Herbert going to fall? I don't know. So I think ultimately Jameis Winston gets paid for a year or two, maybe hits the franchise tag, and I think ultimately he ends back up in Tampa Bay. All right, so number 14, we have Randall Cobb, who surprisingly had a very solid season for the Dallas Cowboys as that slot guy, and I think he comes back. I think it's simple, man. I think the Cowboys bring him back. Of course, we're going to talk about another Cowboy receiver later on this list, but I think ultimately Randall Cobb, what he's doing in the slot for them, he's being reliable. He's getting games where he's going over 100 yards receiving. I think Randall Cobb comes back, man. I don't think it'll be a long-term deal at all once again, but I think ultimately he does come back. Now, once we get to number 13, we have Everson Griffin. Now, is he really going to be out there? Is he really going to get the opportunity to test free agency? And what I mean is he had a contract that was signed through the year 2022. However, that contract voided if he got over 6 sacks. Well, he does have over 6 sacks this season, so he becomes an unrestricted free agent. But I think ultimately he renegotiates this deal early, quick. I don't really think he gives, too much of a delay. I think there will be some other teams interested. Of course, anytime you get a pass rusher like that who get after the quarterback, you're going to have interest. But I think ultimately he signs a long-term lucrative deal with the Minnesota Vikings. I could easily see him getting over $50 million. So Everson Griffin, I think he goes back to Minnesota. I don't think that's too much after that. Emmanuel Sanders, San Francisco. Interesting story, man, because Emmanuel Sanders getting up there age, going to be 32 years old. He gets traded. Basically, Denver, they let him go. He goes to San Francisco. He immediately, upon arrival, makes an impact for the San Francisco 49ers. He's been playing well, but he's older. But at the same time, there's not a lot of wide receivers in this free agent class. So do teams overpay a little bit to bring in Emmanuel Sanders? I think ultimately I don't know, man. This one's tough. I could see a scenario where Emmanuel Sanders gets paid from another team and takes his talents elsewhere. But I think at this point in his career, the way the 49ers are winning, we'll see how the season plays out in the playoffs for San Francisco. I think ultimately Emmanuel Sanders, he stays. I think he ultimately stays in San Francisco, man. But there will be a ton of interest, and I think some teams will try to tempt him. But I think ultimately he does stay with the 49ers. So now we're at Phillip Rivers, man. Phillip Rivers. I don't know what to say about Phillip Rivers, man. A terrible season. I mean, just put it lightly, man. A terrible season. He already said he could envision, potentially playing for another team next season. I think that's if he comes back and doesn't retire, which it sounds like he's ready to play, I think it will be with another team. So I can see Phillip Rivers actually leaving, man. Now, what team does he go to? I don't know. I have no idea what team he goes to. I think for the Chargers, they have Tyrod Taylor. I think they are comfortable with Tyrod Taylor starting for a season or two while they draft a quarterback or try to get a young quarterback to groom. I think Tyrod is the guy for the Chargers. I think they're willing to move on from Phillip Rivers. I think he will move on. I think he will be with another team. Now you get a veteran quarterback. What are teams going to be willing to pay for a veteran quarterback like Phillip Rivers, who has proven, he's a Hall of Famer. He's a guy who can win you games, hasn't had the success when it comes to playoffs and winning games in the playoffs. But he's always typically been very consistent. Just was not that this season. So was that just a fluke? I don't know, man. The guy was, in danger of being benched at some point in the season for Tyrod. So I think he's definitely out of there. We'll see what happens, man. Now, at number 10, we have Danny Amendola, who's having the best season of his career with the Detroit Lions. This one's tough. Whether or not I think he'll come back, man. He hasn't had Matthew Stafford for the majority of the season. I think that changes things. I think they may want to see a full season with Danny and Matthew Stafford. So I could see a situation where Amendola does come back. I think he'll have a market. I think Emmanuel Sanders will have a bigger market than Danny Amendola, but I think there will be some sort of market. But ultimately, I could see a scenario where Danny Amendola comes back to the Detroit Lions. Now, at number 9, we have Jadeveon Clowney, and man, is this one tricky. Jadeveon Clowney was a guy who I think a lot of us expected to get paid if he became an unrestricted free agent. Now, he's going to do that this year. He's going to become an unrestricted free agent. Seattle, they made the trade. He only had, 3 sacks this season? But Seattle as a whole wasn't getting pressure after the quarterback. Seattle's defense as a whole just wasn't, great. Say it was like the season's over for them. They're still playing. But he's shown flashes of the Jadeveon Clowney who we expected him to be. His career has pretty much kind of been up and down, and we've seen a bunch of promise out of Jadeveon Clowney, showing why he was the first overall pick when he came out. But this one is tough, man. This one is tough whether or not he leaves. I could see Seattle wanting him back, especially after making the trade for him. They kind of put themselves in position. Anytime you have a pass rusher, there's going to be a market once again. This is one of those positions. Quarterbacks, corners, pass rushers. There's always going to be a market for those guys, or star offensive linemen, But there's always going to be a market for those guys if they become available. I can see Jadeveon Clowney leaving. I can see maybe a team paying more than Seattle and Jadeveon Clowney going there. I feel like he's going to chase the money. So if I had to bet on this one, I would say Clowney leaves. But I can see the scenario with both. But I'm going to go ahead and say I think he leaves Seattle, man. So what are we at? Number 8 now, I believe. Dante Fowler Jr., who is having a career season, 11.5 sacks. He leaves. Not because the Rams don't want him back. The Rams have to pay Jalen Ramsey. So unfortunately for Dante Fowler Jr., having a great season. I thought he was underrated even in Jacksonville. I think ultimately he's out there on the market and he's going to get paid, man, especially after the productive season he had this year. Michael Brockers, another guy, which is number 7. He's a casualty, man. Maybe, I think Brockers gets signed maybe before Dante Fowler gets signed if the Rams are going to somehow try to squeeze that out. But I think Brockers ultimately, I think he's gone, man. I think he's ultimately gone. But same scenario, man. He's going to get less money than Dante Fowler, but he's going to fall in a situation where he's going to get paid as well, and teams are going to line up to go ahead and get him. Von Miller at number 6 at or pass rusher, outside linebacker. I think he had a year that wasn't that great. You know, the Broncos are going to try to rebuild after the year they had. I think Locke's going to be the quarterback moving forward with that team. I still think he comes back, man. He still has 7 sacks. He's not going to get paid what he did, but I think ultimately he comes back in Denver. I think I could see a scenario where Von Miller finishes his career with the Broncos. So I'm going to say ultimately Von Miller stays in Denver, but we'll see, man. That will be a wild card. Now, AJ Green. Whoa, AJ Green, man, at what is this, number 5. AJ Green did not play this season. Andy Dalton, the guy who's been catching footballs from the past few seasons, I think he could be out of Cincinnati. I think this is Joe Burrow's time. Are they going to equip him with the AJ Green, give him a veteran guy who's a reliable guy to catch some passes? I could see that happening, but Cincinnati's so bad. AJ Green's getting older. This one's tough, man. I think ultimately he could end back up in Cincinnati. I think even though the losing frustrates him, I think he enjoys playing in Cincinnati. He may be one of those guys who wants to just finish his career with that team, almost like a Larry Fitzgerald type of guy. But he's going to get enticed from other teams trying to make that push, teams that are right there trying to win a Super Bowl. I think teams will definitely go after him. But AJ Green, man, that's tough. I'm going to go ahead and say he stays, though. So now, number 4, we have Tom Brady, man. A lot of people are saying Tom Brady could be playing his final game as a Patriot against Tennessee Titans. We'll, of course, see what happens this upcoming weekend if they beat the Titans or not. But people are saying that Tom Brady could be on his way out. He's a free agent for the first time, maybe ever, if I can remember correctly. Teams are going to be out there. I just can't see it, man. It's going to look too weird for me if I see Tom Brady suiting up for another team, let alone a situation where Tom Brady has to play against the New England Patriots. I know it's set up for that. It's set up for the Patriots to kind of move on. It's set up for Tom Brady to kind of move on. I don't know, man. I can't see it. I think ultimately Tom Brady ends back up with New England. It will be crazy. It will be absolutely crazy if he did not. But I'm going to say he stays with the Patriots, man. At number 3, we have Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, the Cowboys, they had the trio they had to pay. Zeke got paid first, surprisingly, because Zeke's contract was not up. But we have Amari Cooper at 3. What does Dallas end up doing, man? You got to bring him back. You got to find a way. I mean, ultimately, man, you have to bring him back. You have to find a way to pay him. He's your guy on the outside. He does so much for the Dallas Cowboys, even though against Philadelphia, for whatever reason, the game of the year, the play of the year for the Dallas, they didn't have him on the field. But I think Dallas ultimately, I think they get a new coach. I think they bring back Amari Cooper. And I think he's a Cowboy next season, which, brings us to number 2, who is Dak Prescott. What does he want? He's looking for, I heard, mid to high $30 million per year range. Does he come back? I think he does, man. Now, do I think Dak Prescott deserves, say he gets $35 million a year, do I think he deserves that much off of talent? No. However, the Cowboys like him. I'm sure whoever they bring in as head coach is going to have to love Dak Prescott. Is going to think Dak Prescott is that guy. And if that is the case, because we've seen ups and downs from Dak Prescott this season, if that's the case, you have to pay the man. Now, is it a franchise tag or is it a multi-year deal? That remains to be seen. But I think ultimately, Dak comes back to Dallas. There's not a lot of other options. What are you looking at? A Marcus Mariota, who I think you could certainly get cheaper. But that's really, I think realistically, your only other option, right? So Dak Prescott, I think ends up staying with the Dallas Cowboys. I think the 3 come back. They're going to shell out a ton of cash making it happen. But he's going to get paid regardless of where he goes. If it's Dallas or another team, he's going to get paid. I just think ultimately it is in Dallas just because the alternatives aren't that enticing. So I think Dak does come back. And at number 1, we have Drew Brees, man. I don't think he leaves. Man. If he does, the contract is going to be stupid crazy. I don't think he leaves. I think he stays in New Orleans, finishes his career there. He's going to get paid in New Orleans or wherever else he goes. But I think ultimately he stays. New Orleans is in a situation where they will be competitive, at least for the foreseeable future, right? The next few years of Drew Brees' career, we don't know how much longer he's going to play. He's 41 years old. So even if it's 3 more seasons, I could easily see New Orleans competing for the next 3 seasons. So I think ultimately he stays. There's not a lot of other situations where he could be thrown into a situation where they are Super Bowl contenders that quick. So I think ultimately he ends up staying, man. He's going to get paid, but we'll see what happens. We'll definitely see what happens, man. And that is the top 15 free agents, at least according to the BigLeague.com, man. You guys let me know your thoughts and opinions. Am I wrong on some of these guys? Do you think some of these guys are staying, some of these guys are going? And maybe throw some names on guys that wasn't on this guy's list as top 15 free agents who maybe he overlooked, or maybe I'm overlooking as well, man. I'd love to hear you guys' opinions. Please remember to go ahead and leave this video a like, subscribe if you haven't already. It's your boy D Lloyd. I'm see y'all next time. Peace.